Hello Mark, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you, Kamal.
What is the policy of TV3 when it comes to covering general elections? I mean, do you have any specific policy that you adhere to?
Our policy is to always look for the news angles, to look for the news stories during the campaign, and that sets the agenda. We're not so interested in giving everybody 5 minutes each or scaling down compared to their percentages. If Peter Dunn comes up with a good story that is resonating with the electorate, then he can lead the bulletin and get the most time on that story. So that tends to be our policy, is to try and apply traditional news values to the campaign.
What is the credibility factor of TV3 among the masses of New Zealand from your organization's perspective?
I think the credibility of our news when it comes to politics is very, very high, because we're independent. We're not owned by the government. We don't answer to anybody. We have total independence from our own management as well. I'm the editor-in-chief and I'm the sole decider of whether something will run or not, obviously in communication or in discussion with my senior producers and political editor. But we're beholden to nobody, and we have no likeness or fondness for any of the political parties. We treat them all the same, and from our point of view, everybody will also get a very, very fair go.
Mm-hmm. Then, in the scenario of the unfolding events that have happened surrounding the televised debates, then how come, some outside factors have dictated and impressed upon the decisions at your end?
Well, I wasn't prepared, as you know, to hold a non-debate, and this is what it was going to be, a non-debate. We can only invite people on. We can't compel anybody to appear. We're not a court, we're simply a broadcaster. We invited all the leaders. The two main leaders declined. It wasn't going to be a debate, therefore, so it wasn't viable to hold it. Now, some of the minor party leaders have jumped up and down about us cancelling this debate on commercial grounds, that we did it for money. And I have to keep correcting them, and I think it's poor form of them to continue down this line when they know that this is not true. We haven't cancelled this debate because of money or commercial reasons. We cancelled it because it would be insulting to the viewer, basically, to have some sort of debate without the main party leaders. Mm-hmm. Now, we have other ways of allowing the smaller parties to put their message to the electorate, and they'll run out over the next month.
Mm-hmm. And what sort of series are you planning? Anything in specific?
From October the 14th, that's Tuesday, Campbell Live is going to host a series of interviews with the minor party leaders. The first one is with Winston Peters, the leader of New Zealand First, our longest serving politician, and that'll be followed by the Greens and the other smaller parties. My own belief is that the public will get a much better chance with John talking to them about their policies than they would have in some cross-party minor debate. I think this will be very good for the minor party leaders, and hopefully it will stop them sounding off about this debate being cancelled. Yes, I think it'll be good to watch.
What does it hope to achieve in terms of aspirations, set goals, in discharging its responsibilities of being a public watchdog?
Well, we do take our role as the fourth estate very seriously, and if you look at Duncan Garner, our political editor, he is always challenging everything that the politicians say, always pushing for the truth, and that is how we look at our role as a news service in New Zealand society. We want the truth. You know, there's a story that's running at the moment, these secret tapes that are coming out. Now, the National Party does not like us putting these to air, but we see it as the viewer's job to make up their mind. We have these tapes, we play them, and it's the viewer's job. So that's our view of taking, if you like, our responsibility. We're not trying to put spin across things. Duncan does try to analyse things as to whether he thinks if this is a good move politically, a poor move politically, etc. But really, it's the viewers that get to make up their minds about these things. So yes, we do take our public responsibility seriously, but that doesn't extend to bowing down to cries from politicians. And when the minor party leaders jump up and down and carry on like that, I don't take any notice of it, really.
Mm-hmm. So just a while back you mentioned about politicians crying down TV3 or any
Yes.
other organization. Have you encountered that sort of behavior from the politicians?
Yes, it happens just about every election period.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand why, because the stakes are so high for them, and the minor parties do get starved of oxygen during the campaign, because even though we have MMP, our political system is still dominated in many ways by the two major parties. And of course, those two leaders, and it's interesting that the minor parties do not seem to attack them with the same vigour that they attack the broadcasters, but the leaders of those two parties were the ones who refused to debate.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't me or TV3, it was John Key and Helen Clark. And you know, when they call us craven and you know, succumbing to bullying, that's nonsense. You know, they ought to address those issues to John Key and Helen Clark, not me.
Can you name any particular political leader that has been vocal and strong in airing their displeasure?
In terms of the minor party debate?
In terms of the major parties who are political entities that are trying to stifle and dictate TV3's decision-making process?
I think all political leaders try to manipulate the system as much as they can to try and spin it their way. The bigger parties, of course, have the benefit of having a whole lot of staff and spin doctors, and it's not so much Key and Clark that are dirtying their hands with this. It's often their press secretaries, their media secretaries who are doing the work for them. But they all have a go from time to time. But during election campaigns, because the stakes are so high, the yelping gets louder, and they all do it. I wouldn't really single any one of them out. They're all at it, really.
How would you view this sort of behavior coming across from Helen Clark and John Key?
For me, it's water off a duck's back. It doesn't worry me. It's part of our robust democracy, if you like. I'm happy to talk to them about it. Sometimes they might have a point, other times we disagree, and we'll have to agree to disagree. But that's okay. I'm not precious about it. It can get a bit rough, but that's the game we're in.
Do you feel that TV3 is susceptible to being held for ransom, dictated to by the powers that be?
No, we're not susceptible to being held to ransom. We're not susceptible to any sort of influence by them at all. We're a very strong independent broadcaster, and under no circumstances will we bow to any sort of political pressure. But
in this particular issue, it has been the other way around, actually, contrary to what you're saying.
No, it was my decision to cancel the debate. Totally my decision. TVNZ have carried on and run theirs, but that's their choice. I just don't see the point. I don't see that you can have a proper debate without the two main party leaders there. I mean, one of the key subjects of that debate would have been the government's record over the past 3 terms. How are you going to have that debate without Helen Clark there? Another major factor in that debate would have been who can work with National. If National wins, as the polls are showing, what sort of government are we going to have? How are you going to have that debate without John Key there? It's a nonsense, and I wasn't prepared to inflict this nonsense on the viewers. So we haven't caved in to any politician. We've just made a decision that these issues are better dealt with in another way, like having John Key interview the minor party leaders at Campbell Live. So, yeah, I'm not sure how much more assurance I can give you in this area. But, you know, the politicians, I mean, one of the things I've got to understand is that, you know, the viewers aren't all that interested a lot of the time in what they've got to say. You know, the viewer's future depends more on their immediate employers, the world economic situation, Alan Bollard, etc. You know, the government, if you like, or the New Zealand political system is only a part of this big fabric. But they tend to think that, you know, they're sort of dominant world powers, these politicians. Well, you know, we've got news for them. They're not.
I mean, like you mentioned and spoke about having a meeting with Helen Clark a couple of months back,
yes,
wherein she personally told you and about her discomfort at,
yes,
you know, being clogged with so many people,
yes,
the debate. Could you expand on that?
She certainly felt that the multi-party debates are messy because of the numbers involved, and I don't disagree with her on that. And if we went back to the previous election, it's why I tried to limit the numbers to 6. And as you know, Peter Dunn and Jim Anderton took us to the High Court and won, so the debate was expanded to 8 leaders. It does make for a difficult event. The amount of time each leader gets is smaller, and it is quite difficult. I agree with her, but at the same time I felt that it should still go ahead even given its shortcomings, and I felt from talking to her in that chair there that she was generally of the same view, but clearly behind the scenes she wasn't, and her and Key's people did a deal. I believe it originated in Labour's office. They sort of deny that, but they won't say who did the deal, so make up your own mind. But whatever the case is, they did a backroom deal to shut down proper debate with the smaller parties. You know, there is now going to be no debate that involves all the major parties.
How do you view Helen Clark's behaviour? Do you think she has stifled TV3's freedom and interfered?
I don't think she's stifled our freedom or interfered, but I think she is letting the electorate down. We know this is an MMP environment. This is a democracy. She only is asked to do it once every 3 years, or twice if you count TVNZ. Twice in 3 years. I think she could handle it for that small time. You know, 2 hours twice every 3 years. It seems to me to be undemocratic, and I think John Key, no matter whose idea it was weak for going along with it, to be honest.
So, post-election, how's the scenario going to be in terms of coverage?
Once the campaign's finished, of course, all attention turns to election night, and I think it's going to be a very exciting night because I think this race is actually going to get closer, and we've got a poll out in the next few days which shows that the gap is narrowing. So I think we're in for a hell of a race on election night, and we're planning to have some special coverage of it. We've got what I think is a fantastic panel for the night. It includes Steve Mahari, ex-Cabinet Minister. It includes Matthew Hooton, a commentator, Linda Clark, a very respected political journalist, Jenny McManus, and Chris Wakaira, who used to be Radio New Zealand's Māori Affairs reporter. Very, very good reporter in my view, very well plugged into Māoridom, because I think the Māori Party is in for a lot of focus, a lot of attention, because I think they will, well, they're looking at this stage like they could well hold the balance of power. So we need to keep a very close eye on them on election night. John Campbell, of course, will host this, and we'll have an unprecedented, I think, number of reporters out with the various party leaders and in the various seats. We also have a joint deal with the Maori television station, MTS, to be in there some of the really interesting electorates like Parakura Horomia, seat on the East Coast, where Derek Fox is going to be a strong candidate against him. So I think probably we'll have the most comprehensive coverage on the night. Traditionally, we also like to have a little bit of fun as well, and we're having some comedy done that will run during the night, particularly earlier in the night. And we also have our KIDS, what's called KIDS, KDIS graphic system, which in the last few elections has produced the fastest to air results service as well. So I'm really looking forward to it, and yeah, I think it's going to be a great night.
Thanks, Mark, for your time.
Thanks very much for having me on and giving us the opportunity to talk about some of this stuff.
Events that have happened surrounding the televised debates, then how come, some outside factors have dictated and impressed upon the decisions at your end?
Well, I wasn't prepared, as you know, to hold a non-debate, and this is what it was going to be, a non-debate. We can only invite people, run or not, obviously in communication or in discussion with my senior producers and political editor, but we're beholden to nobody, and we have no likeness or fondness for any of the political parties. We treat them all the same, and from our point of view, everybody will also get a very, very fair go.
Mm-hmm. Then, in the scenario of the unfolding in the masses of New Zealand from your organization's perspective?
I think the credibility of our news when it comes to politics is very, very high, because we're independent. We're not owned by the government. We don't answer to anybody. We have total independence from our own management as well. I'm the editor-in-chief, and I'm the sole decider of whether something will minutes each or scaling down compared to their percentages. If Peter Dunn comes up with a good story that is resonating with the electorate, then he can lead the bulletin and get the most time on that story. So that tends to be our policy, is to try and apply traditional news values to the campaign.
What is the credibility factor of TV3 among... Hello Mark, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you, Kamal.
What is the policy of TV3 when it comes to covering general elections? I mean, do you have any specific policy that you adhere to?
Our policy is to always look for the news angles, to look for the news stories during the campaign, and that sets the agenda. We're not so interested in giving everybody 5